Welcome, everyone. My name is Amanda McIntyre. I'm an assistant professor in the Arthur Labatt Family School of Nursing. This virtual speaker series was started to share and promote nursing research and scholarship, both within the School of Nursing and across the broader nursing community. In these sessions, our speakers profile innovative research being conducted across academic and community settings, and address how their work can inform transformative changes in practice, education, and policy. So our speaker today is Dr. Richard Booth, and he's going to present for about 30 minutes, followed by some time to take questions. Because we're using a webinar format, you won't be able to unmute and ask questions, but we encourage you to use the Q&A function below to post your questions so that Dr. Booth can answer them at the end. And today's session is currently being recorded. So before we begin today, I'd like to acknowledge that at Western University, we learn upon the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Pewak, and Chinooka nations. Today's scholarship live speaker is Dr. Richard Booth. He is an associate professor in the School of Nursing, and his program of research seeks to explore relationships between human and technological interactions within healthcare and educational contexts. So his program has two main areas. Firstly, technological teaching, learning, innovation for nursing education, and secondarily, digitally enabled healthcare and nursing. Today, he's going to be presenting his work on artificial intelligence and nursing education. So Richard, the floor is yours.
That's great. Thank you so much, Amanda. I'm going to share my screen here and then we'll go from there in terms of showing this slide deck. So there we go. You should be able to see the slide deck at this point. I assume so. If you can't, let me know and I will do things otherwise. So I have roughly about half an hour to talk about lots of cool topics. I decided that going down this approach would be a better solution than speaking about one of the research projects I have going, because this is all tied into my research project. But in some respects, this is more emergent and likely important for faculty members and educators and students to hear about, as opposed to an insular or a singular study that I'm doing. So that's kind of how I phrased it and framed this presentation, because I think it's important for us to see where the current state is and how everyone can work together to contribute to this should you want to, and should this be something of interest to you moving in the future. I've been using this slide since, well, clearly it looks like 2018, and by my citation, at least since 2018. Speaking usually this slide as my final slide in the keynote presentation, talking about how humans and non-humans will come together and work together to create action and knowledge moving in the future. Well, I'd like to suggest that we're probably here now. We've been here for a good decade, but we're really here now visibly, where you can be working with non-human things with human level intelligence pretty much in real time currently in 2023. And I think it's important to set the stage in terms of knowing that because it helps context and rationale and importance of the things I'm going to speak about moving in the future really pull forward. This is an older slide too, but I've used it in terms of looking at decisions that can be automated. And when we start to think about the different types of applications and technologies that live in our day-to-day life, we have automated a lot of things, and a lot of the automation that we see and that we experience and is applied to us on a day-to-day basis is driven by things like artificial intelligence. So whether you want to turn on your thermostat or not can be an AI decision, because you can make the smart thermostat of Nest or Ecobee decide for you. Same with things like insurance. There's insurance companies underpinned by AI and machine learning. I'll let you go look at Lemonade if you want to. And even things that were potentially very, very contentious 20 years ago, like you met your partner, online, which would that have been a faux pas back then. We have swipe left or right to make a pretty significant decision nowadays in terms of who to date or whom to hook up with. So as we move forward in society, the amount of automation tolerance that society expects and is able to receive, I think, is probably increasing. And also, in some respects, the seriousness of the decisions that are being automated are also arguably going up, which is why a presentation like what I'm going to provide today on two different exemplars that touch nursing education, I think, is really important, because we are now at a place where we are now tolerating types of automation through AI that I don't think years ago. Wrote this textbook chapter with a few of my colleagues, including few doctoral students here at the School of Nursing, looking at a pretty contentious way of looking at knowledge and tasks. And we decided that we were going to take a look at the nursing role and start putting on this 2x2 tasks and knowledge in terms of the continuum of high tasks and high knowledge, and what kind of roles nurses underpin that may be augmented or displaced by things with artificial intelligence moving in the future. And you can see here some of the stuff in the bottom left, which is kind of lower intensity knowledge and lower intensity tasks, are probably already being eaten up because there's things like Moxie and service drones that are driving around doing those sorts of things. You get to the top end where, wound care is a very high task complexity and high knowledge complexity. Those things are a little bit harder to automate, but I can already speak of technology that lives in this domain up here. So we are no longer in the world of 10, 15, 20 years ago where social media is the moving, driving technology in society. We are now at a place where both knowledge and tasks are being automated in real time, and they are already affecting you, whether you know it or not. You can take a look, just last recent news headlines for the last almost 4 or 5 months. ChatGPT is everywhere. And the latter half of this presentation, I'm going to speak with the implications of ChatGPT, but it is everywhere. It's going to change industries. It already has changed industries. There's been mass layoffs in the tech sector. Now, is it the economic downturn? Is it scaling of technology? The narrative will probably pan itself out in the next couple of years to see where things are at. But I'm going to suggest to you right now that ChatGPT at all, which I'll get to in a second, is going to influence things like video game design and industry and knowledge work. And you're already starting to see it pop up at universities. If you remember back a few months ago, back in December, when this platform was released publicly, every associate dean and dean in the school at Western was sending emails saying, how are we going to manage something like this? How are we going to put this in there? Myself and a couple colleagues teaching digital health here at West, we wrote proactively what we feel ChatGPT and other knowledge generating bots, how we would want them to be used or not used in a class. So we wrote that into our digital health syllabus at the graduate level, which apparently got shipped around FHS a bit in terms of a boilerplate, because these things exist and they always have existed. I've been saying for the last 6 or 7 years in any of the keynote presentations I've done that I know I have already read a student paper written by an AI machine learning bot. But now you don't even have to try hard. You just copy and paste whatever kind of details you want to ChatGPT, and it'll happily write you a term paper. So where with all this kind of stuff does AI fall into nursing education? Well, that's where we're going to start. So that I need to preface, I need to kind of get that kind of stuff out of the way in the first 5 minutes so you can understand the reality in the world that we're living in April 2023. It is way different than say 2 or 3 years ago, because consumer level access to knowledge generating AI technology is now ubiquitous. It is here, the box has been opened, and we're not going to close it. And unless we adapt real quick, we're going to get left behind again in the digital emergent ecosystem of current reality. So the purposes of today's presentation were to really look at 2 different types of AI technology that are touching upon nursing education, specifically Western and the Arthur Labatt Family School of Nursing, because we're doing work in this, myself and a few others. I'm going to talk a little bit about an AI-powered simulation technology that we have been using for the last couple of years, and we plan to scale in a much more formative way come September of 2023, and also ChatGPT, which, if you don't know anything about it, you'll learn lots about what ChatGPT is in the latter half of the presentation. So the first one I want to speak to is Spark PCS. Now, Spark PCS is a company that creates high-fidelity, serious video game-enabled, AI-driven simulations of patients. So I want you to think, and I'm going to put this in a 1.0 example, of a standardized patient that you hire who has a script, who has a personality that is representing a patient, both their psychosocial, but they're also their biomedical, or as much as you can from a biomedical especially. Spark PCS has essentially done that. So here you're looking at Valerie Miller. Valerie Miller has a history. She's a person, but she also has complaints of headache. When you go up in this video game, which isn't really a video game, it's a serious simulator, you can talk to Valerie in real time in natural language like I'm talking to you now. Now, I would have provided a nice video of doing this, but I could honestly, with the COVID brain fog I'm experiencing, not figure out how to record sound video on my computer and mic video simultaneously in a quality level that I'd be happy to actually represent. But I am happy to show people this platform because we will be using it further in the school. So I want you to just kind of envision what I'm saying. You turn your mic on with this little button down here, and then you can talk to Valerie. You can speak to her natural language, like, hello, Valerie, how are you doing today? And she will respond to you in different ways in natural language, like you're talking to Alexa or Google Home. And then you can start asking her about her medical history, and she'll tell you all her medical history in very kind of nice, succinct things. And you can ask her specific things, like what kind of medication you take. She'll tell you. What did you have for breakfast? She'll tell you. Where do you live? She'll tell you. What time is it? She'll tell you. Like, does your family have a history of headaches also? She'll tell you that. The depth of Valerie is to a scale of something that I have never seen in a simulation. And with a standardized patient, the standardized patient can just kind of make up stuff if they don't have it on their script. But in this case, we have an entire patient with their background psychosocial health history that you can query in natural language. So while you might be looking at this, go, okay, that's great. It's like talking to a chatbot. It is in some respects, but she voices it back. And you also have the ability now to have patients where you can interact. I think about when I was starting to learn how to do patient interactions and interviews and things like that. Who did I practice on? Well, myself. Kind of sit there thinking about what you would say to someone, and then you think about what they would come back with, or what would be an open-ended, what would be a closed-ended question. Well, you now have a non-human thing who will respond to you in real time about themselves, about their health history. That's the beauty of Spark. And then you can see that there's all sorts of other things that we can do down there in terms of vital and signs and symptoms. You can change all this stuff, which I'm going to get to in a second. Now, there's still some things here that are in a kind of, the freedom units of American here, but we'll change that over to Celsius. We've been customizing, and the entire platform is customizable. So we can see what we can have different vital signs. I can give her epinephrine if I want to. I just gave her 77 milligrams to see what would happen. And it changes because there's a biomedical engine that responds to, I don't know, probably a couple hundred different types of medications that you can give this individual. So the biomedicalness of this is extensive, but the ability to interact with a non-human agent in an interview fashion, we think is where the meat of this is. And the really cool thing about Spark is it understands context of how you say something, because you can ask someone to, you can introduce yourself a number of different ways. Hello, my name is Richard. Hi there, how are you doing today? My name is Richard. Now, Spark will understand that because it is able to use machine learning to understand natural language to then pose within its database questions it's going to ask to Valerie, and then spit it back in a verbalized fashion as per the non-playable character that is Valerie. And you can see a bit of that here. This is just one screenshot of a very large list of things that you can customize on Valerie. So Valerie comes as a complete patient set, but there's about 40 or 50 different other standardized patients that are built into Spark that come with the platform, and you can customize them all to whatever you want. So you can see how, the greeting and introduction, just the top level one. You can see here that depending on how you say stuff, it will give you responses back. Now, the speech in terms of the greeting and introduction is a pretty high level one. There's only a couple different ways you can do it, but you can actually write responses for Valerie to respond to virtually any way you greet or acknowledge her presence. And it also records it into the log, so you can track backwards in times what people have actually said to it. So here's one's more specific, the presenting illness, and she comes in with a headache. You can see here that with a bit of pseudocode and involving yourself with the patient and becoming Valerie, you can actually write Valerie to have responses differently than what the company programmed with. So what I'm saying here, and you can see how it's been 2 weeks now. So that's her response to how long when the onset of her headache was. But you can change that. You can change that to 3 weeks. You can change that to 1 week. And then when you start to realize, if you go back one screen here, that all these are customizable, along with every other piece of information about Valerie, that you can essentially make your own patient that's not real, but can respond in real time to questions about themselves, if you have the time and the ability to put it together. Because what happens is, you can see, if you think about how the complexity of a person, there's a lot of moving parts on the standardized patient that you have to capture. But if you're willing to put the time in, which is what we've been doing on the side, you can actually create your own custom patients, which then opens up a whole new roster of opportunity when you can create patients and clients of specific backgrounds and complexions that can respond in specific ways to natural language and understand context of natural language. Because like I said, I've asked them gainfully inappropriate questions to some of these standards, but see what they would respond. And they actually respond in ways that I didn't expect them to. Like, I'm like, wow. The people who wrote the script for that in terms of the response did a really good job. And the cool thing, since it's machine learning, every time you use this patient, Valerie, or other patients like it, it gets smarter because it learns through the syntax of how you're asking questions to specify better in terms of whether you get the response or not. So this is a screenshot of another series video game we made, but this gives you an idea that, you know, one question about health history could have lots of different arms. And if you're able to, because you want to create a standardized patient for education, for testing purposes, for specificity in a class that you're doing, because you really want to channel some sort of value of some clinical or psychological feature, you can do that. So there's lots of examples to pick from right now that the company provides for you. But where I think the value moving in the future for the School of Nursing is the fact that if we look at things from an intersectional perspective, which is sometimes we don't do as much as we probably could, you could actually create scenarios around really psychosocial phenomena that, while have a healthcare and a health and a medical background, are maybe more important from an upstream perspective, like housing situation. I've been doing a lot of work with Cheryl Forchuk and a few others on housing. So maybe you want a housing specific. The person presents not with any kind of healthcare issue specifically, but they're housing vulnerable. Maybe you want to talk to someone about housing vulnerable. If you can be the novelist for the client that you want to present on the Spark, you can write it. Is kind of what I'm saying. So, you know, even life experiences, we've been doing this. We've been trying to break the platform essentially by creating different scenarios of different patients that aren't biomedical in nature predominantly. They have a biomedical background, but the predominant issue for them arising is something much more psychosocial. And then you can interact with these. So really the sky is the limit. The AI is already existing in the background to do this kind of stuff. And we now have a different way, which will be scaling, like I said, come September, to have students practice interviewing skills with different typologies of patients. These patients aren't real, but they can respond at least in a pretty reasonable fidelity to interview questions that are, you know, nicely wrapped up. If you ask it a multi-barreled question, it gets confused. But if you ask it very specific questions about things, about itself, it does a fantastic. It's the best patient simulator that we've found to date thus far. So that is a cool opportunity that we have floating around right now. I don't even have enough time to play with it as much as I want to, but there's about 3 or 4 patient scenarios that I want to make. One of my graduate students, Stephanie Kennedy, has just finished up one of hers where it's an episodic thing. So at a certain time point, the patient has a negative outcome and you have to respond accordingly, both interview and also administer medication. So the sky's the limit in terms of how you can make these scenarios occur. Takes time, but if you have the insight to become like a novelist of the person and become that person, you can write that person. And this is where ChatGPT picks up. This is another innovation that really has only been in the ether for the last 4 or 5 months and kind of emerged in latter part of 2022. What it is, I asked it to tell you here. I said, hey, ChatGPT, I'm doing a presentation tomorrow. Can you say hi? So it's a bot that is infused with a lot of artificial intelligence, and it's trained up on a corpus of data, which is huge. So it can respond like a human would in written text. So it wrote me the, you know, greetings and welcome from its perspective, because I asked it to write from its perspective, and it's welcoming you as an AI language model developed by OpenAI that's been trained on a massive amount of text to give human-like responses. So this response here was generated by an artificially intelligent bot that is able to read, produce, analyze text because it has been trained up on a sheer volume of other text that has read and interpreted. So is it real? It kind of is, but it's not. It's not human. No human wrote this, but it has such human connection because it sounds like someone wrote it, that you can see how this can become both an important and also terrifying potential moving into the future. So I'm not going to get into the background, how ChatGPT works and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to speak to you how you can use it, and I'll let you go off and play with it yourself. But I want you to have some rules of engagement first. So imagine you're like 30, 40 years ago and internet didn't exist. And I said back then, I'm going to give you a piece of technology that will do everything for you in terms of writing everything. It has a limited amount of connection to information and data. Like this is border on science fiction kind of level stuff. It can write you anything you want. It can write you a paper. It can write you a newspaper article. It can write you a song, write you a poem. It can do everything for you. We are literally at that point now where these kind of platforms in written text can mimic human level abilities to a point that it's, especially for simplistic and upfront stuff, to a point that even our AI detection of plagiarism technology still can't actually find it most times. So this is where I want you to have a rules of engagement. If you are going to play with ChatGPT and start to use it for professional level things, you need to have your rules of engagement on what you will and will not use it for, because the slippery slope is here. This thing will literally write me academic level papers and stop. Scoping reviews, it will write me a scoping review 95%, because I tried it. It literally wrote me 95% of a scoping review and also made me some basic tables. The power of this platform is something unlike I've ever seen before. And I haven't had this much of a reaction to a technology platform since I saw Facebook emerge in 2004 or 5, when I realized that, whoa, this is going to change the world. This is the first piece of technology at consumer level I've seen come since Facebook emerged in the 2000s that made me actually stop and think and reflect, become existentially somewhat terrified of what it will and could do to the future. And it's not just ChatGPT. The box is open. The ChatGPT at all kind of stuff is out there and will continue to grow. And I'll end this presentation with kind of comments around the future of it. So here are some things I want you to think about: what you will use ChatGPT for and what you will not use it for, especially as related to your professional role, career, whatever it might be. Because there's some things where this is not human, this is not you. And if it produces things that you claim as yours, there's still going to be human, non-human interference in terms of plagiarism, professionalism, all sorts of other stuff. And also, whenever you copy and paste stuff into this bot, who knows where it goes, right? It goes into the corpus of data, and it's like social media. Once it's out there, you never get back. So if you're writing stuff about things that shouldn't be written about, like patient personal health information, that's going off to the ether. So keep in mind your rules of engagement. This listing of things came from this guy on Twitter. You can see his URL down there. He gives really kind of cool insights. And this is stuff I've been doing, but he did it to me in a really nice listing of 5. I'm not going to talk about 3 and 5 because those get kind of weird. But you can see that the first one here is don't outsource your thinking to ChatGPT. The second one is don't use ChatGPT to create content. And the fourth one is don't ask ChatGPT to answer your questions. I'm going to go through 3 examples of 1, 2, and 4. You can look at 3 and 5 by yourself if you want to, and how I use ChatGPT on a daily basis. And I have been, because I brought the pro account and I use it to complement my COVID fogged brain, because I'm dealing some long COVID symptoms. And it's been a game changer for me, because I'm actually kind of limited to do certain things now, especially fine minutia level things that I used to really be good at. That got melted back in mid-January when I got COVID, and it's still present right now. I'm still having pretty nasty symptoms at the best of times, especially with prolonged computer use. So how does ChatGPT work? I want you to think about Excel. How would you use Excel? Well, you have those pseudocode of equal sum bracket, then you start to click on the cells and add stuff together for you. That's like those are instructions to tell the program what to do. ChatGPT just takes that up a notch. And instead of being non-intuitive like pseudocode, like equal sum, and you have to remember that or find it in the list, you just talk to it like it's real. So if you tell this bot to do something with prompts, it will try its best commonly to do this. So start with an action word. Like, what would you like? I would like you to generate me, and you can see here from the 1. Or if you want to specify your results you're going to get from this platform, give it some context. Generate me this insight written for an academic setting. And you're thinking wow, that doesn't make any sense. How does it know how to do that? Well, keep in mind, it's artificially intelligent. It's been trained up on human language, syntax, and meaning. So it understands when you say generate me something with an academic tone or complexion. So the use of prompts is a different way of interacting with a piece of technology that we have not yet had scaled opportunity to play with. I hope that made sense, because a lot of the technologies that we've been playing with, especially the knowledge producing ones or the knowledge facilitating ones like Excel or Microsoft Word, require us to do manual things. And then it helps codify that manual process. So the equal sum, whatever on Excel comment, or the syntax on SPSS that you derive out. You can use the graphical user interface to do the binary logistic regression, or you can write out the syntax. We are now, those days have sailed. Those days are gone in terms of having to know code to do certain things that are higher level complex. If you can ask the prompt and ask the question in a specific way to get the machine to do it for you, it will more often than not do it for you. And that is the paradigm shift when you're interacting with intelligent non-human devices. So you can see that there's other ways to ask more specific things. I got, and I didn't want to show you, but I got ChatGPT to rewrite me some lyrics to an existing song as sung by Cookie Monster about cookies. And it did a really great job of it because I could sing the song as per the song with the lyrics it generated from, and they actually synced up. It was actually quite terrifying. So these are some prompts that you can consider asking it, but I'm just going to go through some basic examples of things that you can use. There are powerful examples. There are people who are creating entire businesses using ChatGPT to automate certain things. I'm not going to go anywhere near that. Just these are some basic things that it might be able to help you with your day-to-day workflow. So the first one here is don't outsource your thinking to ChatGPT. Use it to augment. So we all have to do a lot of reading in our lives. I'm like, hey, ChatGPT, can you summarize this article? And I put it in there, and it summarized the article. Now, the article I wrote, but I wanted to see if we could summarize, and it did a decent job of it. Like right then and there. We pay people to do that. Now, is it 100% right? Probably not, because I wrote this paper. I know it's missing some stuff. It didn't even say anything about nurses here, but did it do a good enough job for me to kind of nod accordingly? Yes. And that is the cool and also subtly terrifying part of this. I can ask it to do things like summarize me an article. I can copy and paste an article and ask me to summarize the methods in 3 lines, and it'll do that. So you can see here summarization of things to help give you insights to do other things. Like you might not do anything with that summary beyond read it and nod accordingly and go, I think I will cite that paper in that article I'm writing. That might all be all you use it for. You're not actually taking any of the text that it generated, but you're using it as it just distilled 6,000 words of a paper in 3 sentences for me. And yeah, I think that might work. Now, once again, it comes down to how you use it and how you not. Maybe you do, maybe you don't want to use it. I've asked it to proofread pretty much everything. It proofreads most of my emails now, I'm not going to lie. And some of the written stuff that I do that I write up to about 90%. And now that last 10% I can't do anymore because the brain has just lost the ability to see words in certain places. COVID did a really good number just melting all that out of my abilities. And it will clean up stuff. So this is just a very hyperbole level example of how you can do it. I'm like, hey, can you proofread this email? But it could be really anything. How are you today? I got this presentation that I haven't started working on, but I need to finish it ASAP because I'm behind. Can you help me proof this stuff so I can do other tasks? And it brought that very colloquially level thing up a couple notches. Really, at the end of the day, this is going to make reading people's admission letters to grad school much harder, for lack of better words, to understand who wrote what, because things like Grammarly have existed for a long time. You know, the right click on your Microsoft Word has existed to help you with spelling for a long time too. I see this as just the next evolution of proofreading because it already exists. And it's definitely helped me out on the proofreading side of the fence in the last couple of months. Don't use ChatGPT to create content. Remember, that's a really slippery slope. If you get it to create stuff, you're eventually going to get burned because it's probably plagiarism and it's not generated by you. So don't do that, but use it to generate structure. We've all been in places where we're like, I don't know how to write this paper. How do I write that RFP? How do I write this report? What are the main headers? Well, you just ask ChatGPT to give you some suggestions on it. Like, so the topic is how to generate a presentation on ChatGPT. The context. So this is the prompt kind of, the requirements are, I want this. The language is, I want relaxed academic. And the tone, I want it to be casual. And then it gives you an outline. Now, am I stealing anything? No. Did I just augment my workflow by asking a non-human thing with human level intelligence to create me a scaffold of which then I can then generate content around? Yes, that's exactly what I did. But I'm not going to lie, it's a really nice outline. And it goes down. I had to cut it off because the screenshot wasn't. But you can see how I'm like, yeah, a welcome introduction, that would make sense. The benefits, the overview, comparison with traditional methods. I didn't do that, but that's a great suggestion. So once again, you can use it as an augmented thing that help bring your productivity up. Maybe you want to write something and you're like, you know what? I was too negative. We've all written emails like that. We're like, oh, I'm too negative. Well, just ask it to check the tone. So I just got to check the tone of a paper I wrote a while ago. And I was happy to see that it says generally neutral and avoid subjective or emotional language. So that means I nailed that paper in terms of not being polarized in one way or another. But you can see how just even from a baseline thing, you know, we've all had those heated emails that we had to reply to. Maybe you want to ping off what ChatGPT thinks in terms of the tone and the semantic or the complexion of your email. And it will tell you, because remember, it's a trained AI text bot. It understands language. So might as well use it for that kind of stuff. And it's not like, academic plagiarism or anything, because you're just using it as a quote unquote sounding board. So can you tell me if this abstract for a presentation is sounding too academically or a lay audience would understand it? So actually I took the abstract for this presentation and I chuck it in there. I said, it's here, I'll be happy. So I copy and paste it. And it said it strikes a good balance between academic and lay language. And then I can kind of go forward and give me actually some suggestions on it. Now, once again, how much of this nudging from an AI bot do you want to actually follow is up to you. Like, how accurate is it? It's questionable at times. It will make up false recommendations and false references for you every once in a while. But as CPG Gray did on a YouTube video, and I'm going to quote him from a couple of years ago, called "Humans Need Not Apply." He said that AI doesn't need to be perfect, just needs to be better than humans. And commonly it is. That's a paraphrase. So I'm not going to lie. It's pretty darn good. So there are more ways that are going to emerge in the next couple of years, well, years, months, likely months, that are going to affect and influence roles that people undertake that are currently listening to the Zoom call. So linkage with Zotero, so you can essentially have it summarize all your academic PDF papers that you have in real time. There's actually Twitter feeds that show you how to do that. That's a cool knowledge generating feature where you can have summaries of papers before you cite them or before you review them. Just, squiff out the ones you don't want. Like, does this construct that I'm looking for exist in these papers? Because we've all been trying to find that one paper that references something that supports our argument. Well, you can just use ChatGPT, link to Zotero to filter out papers and specify the ones beyond search terms that we commonly do on Google Scholar. If you have a corpus of data that existing, like I have, like 10, 15, 20,000 PDFs on my computer currently right now, you can use it to do statistical analyses. Not going to get into that, but it'll happily generate you R and Python code and SPSS syntax. So you don't even know how to figure out how to do that. If you want to know how to do a binary logistic regression and you need the syntax for that, yeah, you can Google around for that. Or you can ask it very specific things and it'll generate you the R code and you can run that in R. You can create product plans, work plans. You can make tables. I even did an Eglin vector centrality analysis using data that I linked to it from Dropbox. That was terrifying. That the fact that I can bring an external data source and it can do those sorts of things. And like I said, mashup of other kind of platforms. So I plan to, and I see that I'm probably running out of time here, use this to help underpin a little bit of the stuff we're going to do with the Spark platform. I'm going to get it to help me write who Valerie is. I can get it to become Valerie and write me what Valerie might say in certain situations. So this will be a cool little synergy of things. So really, at the end of the day, as I kind of conclude this, I fully expect platforms like this to be embedded into all productivity technology. And it already is. Ghostwriter is an application you can put into your Microsoft Word and it will ghostwrite you stuff underpinned by ChatGPTs. That exists currently right now. But I expect Microsoft, Google, Bing, all those people to be putting this into their products being released moving into the future. And they already kind of are. I expect it to be in all sorts of wearable and formal technology that you'd be carrying around. So your phones of the future will have all this kind of stuff in there. And I want you to think about your interaction with things like Google. Remember when you used to go to the library and you had the cue cards to look up the Dewey Decimal, and then they replaced all those cue cards one day and they had computers? That paradigm shift, you're going to see that level of paradigm shift with search engines, because ChatGPT is going to be interacting with you to find the stuff. It's not just going to be you typing in words and it predicting through algorithms. It's going to be it interacting with you to give you more customized and then like inception level deep sort of stuff, as opposed to just a 1 or a 0. And at the end of the day, I fully expect that someday, part of your academic role, you're going to be expected to train up these agents. You'll be expected to have your own ChatGPT at all sort of thing, and to train it on your research program. And will it become part of your annual performance? Honestly, I won't doubt it. I could see non-human things becoming part of the trainee expectations of academics moving in the future, because we're not that far away from that kind of stuff. Now, I appreciate this last one. Sounds really, really out there. But is it really now? Because in the last 4 months, this thing has changed subsequently knowledge work in ways that I don't think we fully appreciate in April 2023. So there's a crash course. I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any questions. A few minutes over, so I apologize for that.
Thank you, Richard. I just realized listening here, I'm way behind. Way behind in my knowledge. So thank you. That was really, really good. Very timely, very informative. So yeah, let's field some questions. There is one in the Q&A. So maybe we'll start with that one, and then if people have questions, they can just raise their hand.
Yeah,
So that
so
first,
I thanks Helen for the message. It can do it really well, for lack
mm,
of better words. Now we juggle with the ethics. Is it ethical to do that? This is, remember that terms of the rules of engagement. I haven't anyone call it that. I probably should write a paper before someone steals it. But what is your rules of engagement going to be with a platform that can literally write you multiple choice exam questions instantly? Because it will, especially if you provide it with the correct prompts on the question. Then it'll just mix up a bunch. Now, will there be false negatives and like completely spurious stuff in there? Potentially, but it doesn't need to be perfect, right? So do you want to use it as an thing that replaces your like inspiration? Yeah. Like, I won't lie. You know those sentences and paragraphs that you really have trouble segueing together, but they're two important constructs that you need to make happen, and you can't figure out the segue sentence? I'm a big fan of segue sentences. Like, all my grad students probably hate me for that kind of stuff. I've used it for inspiration on like, how do I string these two things together? And it gives me that word. I'm like, oh, that word's gonna be the thing that we use. So did I plagiarize? No, because I took one word recommended to me by an AI bot. I don't see that any different as using a calculator to do long division, because I've forgotten how to do long division, or right clicking on Microsoft Word and allowing it to spell or correct the spelling that I randomly can't correct, like received. I still spell that wrong every time. So it's one of these things where, remember society moving forward and tolerance of automation, they're going up. So inspiration. So go back to your rules of engagement. That's where I'm going to suggest there. I'm not going to suggest yes or no, because I know it can do it already. Whether you want to use it, it comes down to your rules of engagement and whether it fits in the ethical barometer compass that you are using from a teaching learning perspective. So I'm going to give you a whole bunch of non-answers for people who ask me, should you or shouldn't you? Because I don't think anyone really knows right now. Well, I see some other questions. Oh, no problem, Helen. Thanks.
I don't see any more questions in the Q&A. Just looking in our attendees, maybe while others have a chance to think about a question. I have mine that's sort of big picture. I'm wondering from an equity perspective, how you think this is going to change access to information, to knowledge, like sort of globally, and what that might do to the pace in which we change policies and things based on this availability of essentially mass information that people have access to. Do you think that will change?
Oh yeah, all this kind of stuff usually just exacerbates equity issues. Let's be honest. Technology just automates it. So if there an equity issue exists in society leading up to this is going to get exacerbated by this kind of stuff. It's going to polarize, kind of like what social media has done in some respects. So it's going to be great in some respects. Like, it's going to be super helpful. It's going to create crazy new opportunities. It's good, but it's also displace. It's going to create a host of unintended consequences, especially for things that we thought were really not vulnerable to automation, like a lot of the types of knowledge work. Well, I just generated a bunch of multiple choice questions, Helen. Pretty good in real time, while also responding to Amanda's question. So you can see that if I'm able to do that level of productivity with a non-human thing, we need to rethink knowledge work a little bit, because it is not the panacea that's going to solve stuff, but it's definitely a like WD-40 for making things fluid and seamless and frictionless. So, Amanda, I wish I had a better response for you, but if an equity issue existed, it's just going to get worse through stuff like this. Will it get better? That'll be up for us to steward technologies to enable things. But I think strategically, a lot of the times, if you look at automation in general, it always has been a societal net positive. But you never hear about the net negative individuals who experience the automated. Like, there's lots of roles that don't exist anymore. You just don't hear about them. So I think, once again, kind of the major thesis I usually say around types of technology like this, that I've been banging the drum for the last 10 years, is what do we want to give away to ChatGPT at all like technologies? Because the question of whether we should, that ship sailed. So what we should and what we should protect as a human level role, human level task, human level piece of knowledge that we convey, those are the things that we really need to start like refining, protecting in contracts, protecting in legislation, protecting in evidence. And then we also have to think about roles that are no longer, like that first slide about the nursing role, is wayfinding, is restocking shelves of towels. Is that something that we need to invest time and mental energy in anymore? Or has that already been automated? We just haven't realized it. And now we're in the place where when we think of automation, we think about like tasks. We're now in knowledge automation, which we kind of thought would be protected from for a little while longer, but I don't really think we're going to be. So
That's great. Thank you. You did answer it. Okay. Looking for other questions. Does anybody else have a question they would like to ask Richard? Oh, Helen said for Spark PCS, you said the virtual SP learns how to respond to various questions over different interactions. Could they become too good at answering questions so that students may not learn the finesse needed to encourage clients to answer questions?
yeah, not in the immediate. It's not that smart. It's smart, don't get me wrong. It's step changes ahead of any bot that I've ever talked to. But it's not that smart yet. I'll pause on the yet, because we're talking about a technology that didn't really exist 3 years ago. Like, we were looking at technology like this pre-pandemic, just before the pandemic hit. And we're like, oh, it's too bad we don't have an Alexa. Like, I think Alexa had just scaled at that point. Like, too bad we didn't have an Alexa that was a standardized patient. And then suddenly there was one. It was like, oh, well, that's disturbing. And so it's getting better, because I played with multiple iterations of Spark, and it's been improving over the years. Like almost singular years, because it hasn't really existed for that long. So will it become too good in the future? Maybe, but we're not at any risk for it in the immediate, I'd say 5 years. But the company is really engaged, and I know they kind of watch our developments on our side, because we do some really weird things with it. But the potential is there. And it's one of these things where I think we need to appreciate that technology like this in clinical education exists, and make some decision points of how we want to leverage it or use it or augment it with our traditional mechanisms. Because if we don't, like, you can see ChatGPT, the amount of hockey stick curve that just enables in 4 months. This stuff exists, and pretending like it doesn't, I think, is a really poor strategy for longevity. So I've sort of answered your question and also build on the hell. Apologies.
So building on what you just said, though, about within the nursing program, Sarah said, specifically for graduate training, how do you think we can support our grad students to integrate this ethically into our research practice? And maybe even building on that, just what sort of steps as a nursing program do we use to inform our students of how it can be used?
Well, the cool thing about Western nursing is, in our graduate and undergraduate program, we have a digital health requisite course. Like, I don't know of any other schools in nursing that have that, where we talk about the role of AI. And then, have things been set down? No, it's way too fluid. Like, what is ethical, what isn't, is going to come down to a number of different factors that we don't. But asking those questions up front, and even being aware that there are even questions, I think, is half the game. So I think there's lots of room for potential. And once the COVID brain fog goes away a little more, I got a couple of things that I want to do to help steward this at Western a little bit further, because you can see that the box is open. There's no way closing this. The students are going to use it. If faculty are using it, there was some guy who just got busted because he's publishing a paper every 36 hours using bots just like this. Like, you can go look them up in that example. He's just been using some trained up machine learning thing to write them papers every 36 hours. So this kind of stuff exists, and to pretend it doesn't. So how do we build it into graduate education from a professional perspective, I think, is an ongoing conversation that everyone needs to participate in and everyone needs to play with. So go out, create a free trial on ChatGPT, and then you can understand what I'm talking about here. Now, there's a binary response. People are like, oh, it's nothing, or people say it's everything. The reality is it's somewhere in the middle. But try it out for yourself. And then you can take a look at the implications and think of some of the stuff I've mentioned, and think about, if I told you back in the late 90s that you could push a button on your phone and someone from the internet would drive up and you would get into their car, you wouldn't have believed me. But you do that now. So really, are we that far away from having a non-human thing that can spit out high-level human intelligence in aggregated and processed fashions to support your work moving in the future? No, I see this as the evolution of the right click on the squiggly line underneath the misspelled word on Microsoft Word. So what that means for us in the future, I don't know. I wish I had the answer, but I think we need to have some deeper level conversations about it, and also some response to this currency that we're in. I see Sheena also, because I'm just kind of going back through, and I know there's a duty of care one there, but I'll get to it. Where do we see the future of nursing in the technology evolving world? I probably need a couple hours to respond to that one, Sheena. But really what it comes back down to is we need to think about what is nursing moving into the future, and what has already been subtly augmented out of our roles. Not because we want them to be augmented, but it has just happened through entropy. It's just happened. So I've got a couple papers out there. I'm not saying I'm like the authority on it. I do a lot of future thinking. I'm usually pretty half empty and covered in tinfoil when I do so. So it's one of these things where the future is we need to think about what is of value to us and protect it, because there will be forces that will try to take those away from us. And then when we get a benefit, we need to protect it with policy and legislation. Because if we don't, any benefit, any net gain we get will just be eaten up in other ways. They'll make us more efficient. And we can see that kind of like military industrial complex almost happening in all types of forms of society. And now, especially in the knowledge work, where any gain through technology means is already taken up and eaten from an efficiency perspective elsewhere. So we are full into the world of automated nursing. We don't want to admit to it, but your electronic medical records is a form of automation. CTAS is a form of automation. Oh, there's a bunch of other stuff with the Pyxis machines, automation. There's so much automation that occurs in the background of healthcare, right? We just don't think it as automation. All that lean stuff we did a while ago. This is the next wave of automation, and it's going to be not just process, it's going to be knowledge. So we need to think about what knowledge we hold, that we want to hold on to, and what knowledge we want to train into non-human things, to replicate things that we did or do, but we have the choice of that, not it being forced upon us, because we'll probably have it forced upon us if we don't. Once again, I have some better ideas about that, but I can't pull them together right now in the brain fog of the COVID experience. What is the duty of nurses and scholars to cushion the negative effects of digital technology and the epistemology of justice and not perpetuating dehumanizing relations of patients? Yeah, that's a huge question. So the negative effects of digital technology, there's always positive, there's negative, and there's going to be some indifferent stuff. Usually the unintended consequences is usually where I go. So a lot of the times technology isn't made to be negative up front. It just happens to become negative or used for negative or nefarious reasons. So I always like to look at it as a very unintentional, or the causes of technology that occur that essentially generate equity issues. And that's usually where it ends up landing at the end of the day. Oh, this comes back to, I think, Sheena's conversation of what does it look like? What does future nursing look like? What is our role? And one of the things I've said a while ago, pre-COVID, was that our role moving in the future will be the stewardship of how these technologies interact with humans. So we can at least have some say on clinical technology, healthcare technology, because I don't think we can deal with like the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Metas out there. But we can suggest stuff, but that becomes our locus of control, becomes a lot more diffused and at that point. But from a health technology perspective, we already have things that are using AI. So do patients know that? Do they care? Remember, the further we go in the future, less we kind of become tolerant to automation. So where does it come into us needing to cushion versus us needing to steward versus us needing to work collaboratively with patients and their families to ensure that this is the direction they want to move forward into the future? I don't know about the dehumanizing element. I think that depends on how you look at things. Is technology dehumanizing? I don't know, probably to a certain degree, but it's also liberating for others, because right now we're sitting here on a Zoom call that's being recorded. Is this liberating for me? Yeah, because it's hard for me to sit in a big room nowadays with a lot of people. My brain just can't do it with the fog, but we can do this on a webinar. My wife just was talking to her family GP yesterday on essentially what is a Zoom call. So I think we need to have kind of a larger view on what the future, kind of back to Sheena's comment, of nursing will be in an emergent digital world, and then look at the dimensions, and one of which will definitely be dehumanizing and increasing of stigma and increasing of equity issues, but others will be pretty emancipatory, I'm thinking. But it's going to be up for us to really determine whether our profession looks like. Well, that made no sense. What our profession looks like moving into the future, because I don't think we fully appreciate some of the technologies and the emergent things that are occurring in the background of society that are going to have immediate and direct influence on our profession. We just won't see it, but then one day you'll have a drone driving across your organization cleaning the floors, and that person that used to drive the little machine, they're gone. Like that kind of stuff just happens one day. Just like we saw in December when ChatGPT scaled, and suddenly now we have to deal with students writing papers on ChatGPT. Just an inflection point one day, and then something that didn't exist or was existential now is material and has changed because we haven't put enough thought and leadership into thinking about these sort of things before they happen. That's a long-winded response. I wish I had the ability to synthesize. I need ChatGPT to synthesize my arguments down a little more, apparently. But hopefully that touched upon some of the Sheena's responses there.
Thank you, Richard. Take a breath.
Yep.
Does anyone have any last minute questions? We only have a couple minutes left, like maybe one. Okay, well, that was an excellent presentation. And thank you to everyone who asked questions. I know that was just a taste of what Richard could sit and talk to us about. So I want to thank you again for being our Scholarship Live speaker today. And before we leave, I just want to remind everybody that the next session takes place, it's on the last Tuesday of the month, so it's at 12 o'clock. And the next one will be May 30th with Dr. Kim Jackson. Thank you.